Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed. At 1,000 subscribers, I'll be posting a special video. The tires screamed toward our mailbox and I started running. By the time the car jumped the curb, I was already outside. My name is Aaron and I was 43 that night. I did not think I was a dramatic parent back then. I just knew my kid was about to hit something that bleeds. I yanked the driver door and it stuck for a second. The wheel jerked in her hands and the hood shuddered forward again. I threw my shoulder against the frame and dragged it open hard. The car lurched once more, then stalled because her foot slipped sideways. In that stupid messy shuffle, one thing hit me harder than fear. Alcohol rolled out of the car and punched straight up my throat. Not a little whiff from one drink slowly nursed at dinner. This was sour, heavy air that meant way too many shots. Sophie squinted at me and tried to focus like I was distant. Her mouth curled into this lazy grin that made my skin crawl. "Relax, I am good," she waved me away with a loose hand. Her voice dragged over the words like her tongue barely listened anymore. She reached for the gear stick again and my whole body snapped. I slapped her hand hard and grabbed the keys with my other. Metal dug into my fingers while part of me still hesitated. I knew taking that ring would not feel small in the morning. Even in the middle of panic, your brain still plays politics inside. Some quiet piece whispered that I was overreacting again as usual. A louder part pictured headlights on a stretcher and would not shut up. That louder part won while Sophie glared like I had slapped her pride. I twisted the keys out and shut off everything with one twist. The dash lights died and the silence after the engine almost hurt. For a second, all I heard was my breathing and her muttering. My hands would not stop trembling, and that embarrassed me right away. Parents are supposed to be steady, but my heartbeat felt like a siren. "What the hell, Mom?" She leaned back in the seat. Her head lolled against the headrest and her mascara had smudged everywhere. She flicked my wrist like I was stealing her phone, not her vehicle. Up close, her pupils looked wrong, huge and glassy even in the dark. She smelled like liquor and cheap perfume and bad decisions stacked together. I tried to keep my voice calm because yelling always makes her harder. "Cut it out, you are hammered." I stepped back from the door. She snorted and rolled her eyes, a slow, exaggerated circle of contempt. "Everybody drank tonight, you want me stranded with creeps in the parking lot." That hit a specific nerve because she knew exactly what I feared most. The passenger door opened behind me and my stomach clenched on instinct. For a split second, I thought it was some stranger from that party. Instead, it was one of her friends, equally wrecked and giggling at nothing. She stumbled out and almost fell, then braced herself on the roof beside me. That was the moment I realized this was not one stupid slip. I told the friend to call her parents or whoever and head inside. She rolled her eyes yet again and shuffled off, phone clutched loosely. No one argued about who should drive, which told me plenty already. Sophie watched the little scene with that amused, bored smirk she gets sometimes. I could feel my anger rising simply because she treated this like comedy. Behind us, a porch light came on and I heard a door click open. A neighbor stood there in silence, taking in the mess with folded arms. I gave a tight wave that was more apology than greeting for sure. He did not shout or move closer, he just stared for an extra beat. I knew exactly what he saw, another family that could not control their kid. "Move," I told Sophie and tugged at her arm toward the house. She shook me off and clung to the steering wheel like it loved her. "I can walk, chill, I am not a baby," she muttered it under her breath. She tried to climb out while still half tangled in the seatbelt strap. The whole thing would have looked funny if I was not terrified already. I wanted to drag her out, yet I also knew that would explode things. At 19, she is all edges and sparks and pride wired to dynamite. Every shove from me lands like proof that I do not respect her. Still, watching her sway, there made something inside me finally snap anyway. I bent down and unlatched the belt, then hauled her onto her feet. She swayed once, then twice, then grabbed my arm to steady herself without comment. That tiny instinctive grab cut through some of my fury right away. It reminded me that under all this noise, she was still just my girl. Of course, she dropped my arm the second she noticed the softness in my face. Stop babying me, I got home fine. She stepped ahead of me. I followed her up the path, keys dug deep into my palm. Inside, the TV was already loud enough to cover most of our noise. My husband Mark sat on the couch with his feet stretched toward the screen. He glanced over his shoulder once, then turned back. Like it was no big deal. Even now, remembering that look makes my teeth clamp together in pure frustration. She almost took out the mailbox, I said as I stayed by the door. My shoes were still on and my pulse still some kind of frantic drum. Mark muted the game with a slow, bored press of his thumb. He looked Sophie up and down like he was checking for broken bones only. She is here, she is fine, let her breathe, he said with a shrug. That last line still echoes in my head when I replay this night. Let her breathe, like I was choking the air out of her lungs. Sophie seized on it instantly because of course she did in that state. See, Dad gets it, you are going nuclear over nothing again, she laughed. The two of them on one side of the room turned me into the villain. I walked closer so he could actually smell what I could smell already. She is wasted, she drove like this, that is not nothing, I said. My voice rose on that last word and I hated that rise. I know how it sounds now, like the nightmare mom cliché. Mark wrinkled his nose slightly yet still managed a little half-amused smile. I have seen worse, we all did dumb stuff, he answered without hurry. He nodded at Sophie as if they shared some secret club I knew nothing about. The way she lit up at that nearly broke my focus right then. She leaned against the doorway with folded arms, playing the cool rebel with backup. I felt like the hall monitor in my own life, whistle and all. There are cops 5 minutes away, I said as I kept my eyes on him. If a patrol had seen her, we would be at the station right now. That was not drama at all, just the picture my brain kept painting. His jaw tightened a fraction, although his voice stayed friendly on the surface. You are spiraling again, Aaron, she got home, let it go, he replied. Some part of me wanted exactly that, to drop it and sit down. Turn the volume back up and pretend we were just another tired family again. I could almost feel the couch cushions against my legs for 1 second. Then my fingers pressed into the metal in my hand, and reality snapped back. The keys were a wait and a question and an answer all at once, whether I liked it or not. I am keeping her off the road, I said more to myself first. Then I lifted the ring where they both could see it from across the room. Sophie straightened like I had lifted a weapon, not some stupid car keys. You cannot do that, I need it, I have work tomorrow, she shot back. Mark exhaled and leaned his head against the cushion, then watched us like a referee. I did not look away because the second I blinked I would fold. This is not a debate, you drove drunk, you lose the car, I told her. She scoffed, this rough, ugly sound that did not sound like my kid. Her eyes filled and then cleared like she pushed the tears back by force. If you take it, I will just buy my own someday and disappear, she said. That line sliced straight under my ribs because I knew she meant it. At that age, threats like that are not just drama, they are trial balloons. Part of her wanted me to back off, part of her wanted a wall. I could feel Mark watching me decide which parent I planned to be now. The room felt small even though nothing had moved except our mouths and hands. Mark finally stood, which always means he thinks the conversation has dragged too long. Enough, everyone is tired, we will talk tomorrow, he said and stretched once. He stepped between us with his palm up, peacekeeper routine he relies on too often. Give me the keys, I will hold them, happy now, he offered lightly. He did not fool me for a second, though I almost wanted to let him. If I passed them over, this would melt into one vague family story. Remember when Mom flipped out over one party? What a buzzkill that story became. No lesson at all, just proof that my boundaries were suggestions and not rules. Maybe I could have lived with that if I had not seen those headlights earlier. That near miss replayed behind my eyes every time I blinked, brighter than the TV. So I put the keys in my pocket instead and stepped back from him. His jaw clenched once, a tiny twitch quickly covered with another fake smile. Fine, Aaron runs the house tonight, he said with a light voice edged underneath. Sophie rolled her eyes so hard I thought she might actually fall over again. I turned toward the hallway because if I stayed I would start screaming. Sophie brushed past me toward her room, shoulder catching mine harder than needed. "Do not come in and lecture me," she muttered as she walked away unsteady. Every step she took down that hallway sounded louder than it should have sounded. I waited until her door slammed before I let out the breath I held. It felt like the house itself exhaled with me, irritated and tense and restless. In our bedroom, I finally sat down, still fully dressed with keys pressed into my thigh. Mark stayed in the living room with the volume. Elo, that blue flicker leaking down the hall. I could hear his laugh once in a while, and it twisted something in me. There was no joke here that I could find, no punchline that landed. I curled around that stupid ring of metal like it was the only barrier left. Lying there, I tried to imagine the next morning, all of us calmer. Maybe she would apologize, maybe he would admit I had a point, maybe something. Instead, every version I tried ended with both of them irritated and distant. I had no idea yet how far that distance would stretch in the weeks ahead. Back then, it just felt like a bad night. I did not know it was the first crack. Something slammed into my bedroom door before sunrise, and I snapped upright. "Open up, I need my keys," her voice came out raw and loud. My heart did that sharp drop you get before your brain fully wakes. The keys were under my pillow because I did not trust my dresser yet. I already knew this morning would be a fight before I touched the floor. I cracked the door and saw her leaning on the frame, face pale and sweaty. Her eyeliner had turned into hard gray shadows, and her eyes looked almost bruised. "Give them back, I feel like trash and I still have to work." She tried to sound firm, but every word dragged like it weighed something. I kept my hand behind the door, fingers tight around the metal so she could not grab. "You are not driving today," my voice came out calmer than I felt. The calm surprised me and annoyed her at the same time, which I saw instantly. She snorted and glanced past me toward the bed like she could see hiding spots. "You cannot just steal my car because you got spooked last night." That last phrase hit deeper than she knew, because it was exactly what Mark thought too. I stepped into the hall so she could not push inside and search anything. "We are not doing this at 6 in the morning, I told her slowly. "You scared the life out of me, you are off the road for now." She lifted her hands like I had pulled a weapon and not just boundaries. "This is insane, I just need to get to my shift or I get fired." Her voice cracked on that last part, and for a second guilt punched me. Jobs at her age feel like lifelines, and I knew that very well. I almost caved right there, that tiny wobble before a bad decision. Then I pictured the way the car had jumped toward our curb last night. "I will drive you today," I said, "and we figure out the rest later." She hated that suggestion instantly, which somehow comforted me because at least it was consistent. "I am an adult, my friends drive after parties all the time." That sentence made my skin feel too tight over my bones right then. I realized she genuinely believed that counted as a normal argument and not a warning. "You are not your friends," I answered, and she rolled her eyes so hard it hurt to watch. Behind her, the hallway light flicked on, and Mark appeared, rubbing his jaw. He looked from her to me like we were kids about to wrestle over toys. "What is going on now?" he asked, voice still rough from sleep and irritation. Sophie turned to him fast like someone had thrown her a rope. "She is holding my keys hostage and trying to ruin my job." He shifted his weight and studied me for a long second before speaking. "Aaron, breathe, it was one rough night, she has responsibilities." There it was again, that word that landed like a verdict against me. Responsibility somehow meant letting her operate a 2-ton weapon hungover and shaky. I wanted to scream that out loud, but I knew exactly how dramatic that would sound. "You did not see the way she pulled in," I answered, keeping my tone low. "I am not risking someone else's kid because we want to be fun parents." He scratched his cheek and looked away for a moment like he was counting options. Sophie watched his face like it was a scoreboard. I could feel her silently betting that he would take her side again. "How about this?" He lifted one hand, peacemaker mode fully engaged. "She does not touch the car for a few days and you still drive her around." He looked pleased with that plan, like he had just solved world peace. Sophie groaned immediately and leaned her shoulder into the wall. "I cannot keep begging for rides like a middle school kid." I noticed she did not deny being drunk, which mattered to me more than they realized. She complained about logistics, not about the risk or about my fear. That told me exactly where her head still was. I shook mine and felt the frustration settle into something colder. I am not negotiating safety levels. The car is out of rotation until I say otherwise. Mark's mouth tightened, just a small movement that most people might miss. Until you say otherwise, he repeated very quietly like he was tasting the words. That echo stung because I heard the accusation baked inside it. Control freak, dictator, all the things he never outright called me were sitting there. Sophie caught it too, ND, her first real smirk of the morning flickered across her face. I turned away before I started arguing with both of them at once. Get dressed, I told her. We leave in 20 minutes. She stomped back to her room, muttering about babysitting and power trips. Mark followed me into ours, closing the door with more force than needed. The air between us felt heavier than it had last night, which I somehow had not expected. I get that you were scared, he started, hands on his hips now. But you are sliding into overkill, you know that, right? I stared at the floor for a second because if I met his eyes, I would yell. She drove wasted, I said. That is not a minor oops to brush off. He exhaled through his nose and looked at the ceiling like I was exhausting. We did reckless stuff at that age too, he answered. Remember that party where half the seniors piled into one car? I did remember, and the memory made me colder instead of softer. In that story we were just lucky, not smart, I said, voice tight. Why would we aim for lucky when we can aim for alive? He rubbed the back of his neck, a sign he wanted this conversation to end. I am just saying, if you clamp down too hard she will shut you out. That sentence landed with its own type of threat, even if he did not mean it that way. Shut you out, not us, not both parents, just me. I heard the split and hated how accurate it already felt. I slid the keys from under my pillow into my pocket, pressing them deep. His eyes flicked to the movement then away, trying to act casual. I will drive her today, I repeated, trying to keep my voice even. You can be the soft place later if you need that role so badly. That last line came out sharper than I intended, and his head snapped a little. That is not fair, he answered softly, but there was nothing soft in his stare. He walked past me into the bathroom, ending the exchange without any truce. I stood alone for a second, listening to the shower start up. Water masked the quiet in the house but did nothing for my mind. I could not shake the feeling that I was suddenly the only adult here. Driving Sophie to work an hour later felt like transporting a bomb with opinions. She climbed into the passenger seat without looking at me once. Headphones went in, volume turned up enough that I could hear the beat. Her jaw stayed clenched and her foot tapped the floor nonstop. Every tap felt like a countdown I could not read yet. Halfway there she pulled one earbud out and stared straight ahead. So what is the plan? She asked, voice flat but edged. Do I just never drive again because you panicked one time? I kept my eyes on the road and tightened my grip on the wheel. It is not one time to me, I said. It is a line you crossed. She laughed once, no humor in it at all, just annoyance. You always do this, one mistake and suddenly my entire personality is reckless. That hit closer to home than she knew, because there was some truth buried inside. I do see patterns quickly, and I do react hard once I notice them. You want to prove me wrong? I asked. Start by not risking lives on the highway. She turned toward the window and shoved the earbud back in. Conversation over, judgment rendered. I was the unreasonable one again. I dropped her at the side entrance where employees go in. She slammed the door, then jogged away without glancing back once. Watching her disappear, I could not tell if I had protected her or pushed her further. Back home, the silence felt foreign, almost fake after all that noise. I made coffee without tasting it, hands moving on autopilot. Instead of scrolling social media like I usually do, I opened the browser. My fingers typed out phrases I never thought I would be searching on a casual morning. Teen drunk driving statistics, first offense consequences, fatal crash stories. I clicked one article, then another, unable to stop. Pictures of wrecked vehicles and grieving parents filled the screen. Each story had the same structure and the same knife at the end. Everyone always thought it would not happen to them until it did. My chest tightened and I had to push my chair back from the table. Looking at those numbers should have made me feel justified. Honestly, it just made me feel like I was walking on a cliff edge. If I eased up, I could end up one of those quotes under a headline. If I stayed strict, I could lose my kid in a different way entirely. There was no version where this ended without someone blaming me. My phone buzzed on the table and I flinched like it might explode. It was a string of messages from Sophie, all short and sharp. Need car tomorrow, double shift, bus schedule sucks, this is impossible. I stared at the screen and my thumb hovered above the keyboard. Every reply that came to mind sounded either too harsh or too weak. Before I answered, a new message popped up from Mark. We should talk later, there. Has to be a middle ground. I could almost hear his tone in those words, smooth and reasonable. Middle ground had become his favorite phrase any time I drew a hard line. I locked the phone and slid it face down, not ready to negotiate my instincts. That afternoon, I moved the keys out of my pocket into a drawer. I chose the one in our room under a stack of folded shirts. It felt paranoid, like I was hiding contraband instead of car access. Still, I did it because I knew myself and I knew them. If I made it easy, someone would eventually decide to borrow the car. When Mark came home, he watched me a little too closely. How was she on the drive? He asked while kicking off his shoes. I shrugged and kept my answer short because I knew what he wanted to hear. Quiet, angry, normal for her right now. He nodded like that confirmed his entire theory about my overreaction. Over dinner, he launched the topic in front of her without any warning. So we are going to figure out a plan about your transportation, he started. Sophie perked up immediately, eyes flicking between us like a spectator. I felt my stomach knot because I knew I was about to be cornered. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, ready to pitch his compromise. What if she only uses the car for work and school, he suggested. No late-night parties, no extra errands, just point A to point B. He sounded proud of the structure, like he had engineered safety itself. Sophie jumped on it fast. Yes, exactly, that is fair. I am not trying to cruise around, I just need to live. I could see how reasonable it sounded from the outside. I could also see the trap plainly, because I was the one holding the fence. You are asking me to pretend she did not already blow through a huge rule, I answered. If we reset now, the lesson is that everything is negotiable if you push. My voice stayed steady, but my pulse had shifted back into alarm mode. He frowned and tapped his fingers on the table, restless now. This is not about punishment forever, it is about teaching responsibility. That word again, responsibility, it felt poisoned in my ears at this point. Responsibility includes facing consequences that actually inconvenience you, I answered. Sophie groaned and dropped her head back, exasperated. You both are acting like I killed someone, she snapped, eyes bright with frustration. There was no accident, no cop, no nothing, you are making it huge. That line sliced me because I knew she was not lying. There had not been any crash that night, no ticket, no officer at our door. That absence became her entire argument, and I could feel Mark leaning toward it. He looked at me, then at her, then back at me again. In fairness, he started, and my stomach twisted because I knew what came next. Nothing actually happened, we could use this as a warning instead of a sentence. I laughed once under my breath, shocked at my own reaction. A warning is what you give before someone gets behind the wheel drunk, not after. That shut him up for a second and the table went quiet. Sophie pushed her chair back hard, making it scrape. I am done begging, she tossed out, figure it out without me. She walked down the hall and shut her door, not quite slamming it this time. I watched the spot where she had been and felt something inside me tilt. Mark cleared his throat and stood, stacking plates just to have something to do. You are going to lose her over this, he said, not looking at me. The words hit harder than any insult he could have used. I wanted to scream that I was trying to keep her alive, not keep her happy. Instead, I just stood too, suddenly exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. 2 days passed with cold small talk and careful distance. I drove her to work and back like a chauffeur with no tipping. She spoke only when absolutely necessary, clipped phrases tossed into the air. Mark kept playing both sides, joking with her and sighing with me. Every ride felt like one more round in a quiet war no one else could see. On the third evening, I pulled into our street after grocery shopping. Something felt wrong before I even reached the driveway. Our car sat at a slight angle it had not had when I left. It was subtle, just a different line against the curb, but I knew it instantly. My chest tightened before my mind fully processed what I was looking at. I parked and walked straight over, heart thudding too fast. The hood felt faintly warm under my palm, like it had just been running. That tiny detail made my vision narrow for a moment. I checked the tires, then the front bumper, searching for fresh damage. Nothing obvious, which somehow scared me even more because it meant this was practice. Inside, Sophie lounged on the couch scrolling her phone like any normal evening. Mark sat in the armchair, game on again, remote loose in his hand. Neither of them looked startled when I stepped into the room. I stood there for a second, still holding my grocery bag, waiting for someone to flinch. No one did, and that calm almost pushed me over the edge. "Who moved the car?" I asked, voice sharper than I intended. Sophie did not look up, just shrugged one shoulder. "I did. I needed to grab something from my locker earlier." My stomach lurched because that sentence knocked over every rule I thought we had. Mark finally glanced at me and then quickly back at the television. "With what keys?" I asked, because I already knew they were not mine. That got her attention. She dropped the phone to her lap and stared. He shifted in his seat and cleared his throat again, stalling. "I had a spare made a while ago," he said, almost casual. It felt like the floor under me dropped an inch at those words. My mind jumped straight to the drawer in our room. I walked down the hall without another word while they watched me go. The shirts I had folded were still there, stacked neatly. The original keys were in the back corner, untouched, exactly where I had hidden them. I realized then that my entire little security system had been for my own comfort only. When I came back to the living room, my hands were empty. I felt strangely light, like I had just run too far. "You went behind my back and handed her another way around the rule," I said. My voice stayed low, which somehow made both of them sit up straighter. This was not a scream, this was a verdict. Mark rubbed his forehead and finally met my eyes. "I was not going to leave her stranded for days," he answered. "I told her to keep it short and take side streets." He actually sounded proud of that plan, like it proved how careful he was. I stared at him, trying to understand how we were looking at the same situation. Side streets, short trips, little phrases that sound harmless until something goes very wrong. Sophie shifted on the couch, eyes flicking between us like she wanted to disappear. In that moment, I could not decide who scared me more. The teenager who thought nothing bad could happen, or the man who knew exactly what could and still rolled the dice. Looking at them together, I realized I was badly outnumbered and the real crash had not even happened yet. The phone rang 3 times before I understood the noise. My brain went straight to hospitals because that is where anxiety likes to start. When I finally answered, a man on the line was already shouting. "Your kid just hit my truck and took off," he yelled so loud it crackled. I grabbed the counter with one hand because my legs forgot what to do. "Who is this?" I asked, though I already guessed. "Across the street," he snapped. "Blue pickup, your girl backed right into it." His breathing was harsh, full of adrenaline and fury and something like fear. "Get outside now before I call someone else," he finished. The line went dead and the sound stayed in my head, louder than the ringtone. I moved faster than my thoughts, keys forgotten for once. My chest hammered while I crossed the living room toward the front door. Mark looked up from his show, eyebrows pulling together like I was interrupting. "Where is the fire?" he asked, lazy voice that scratched every nerve. "Neighbor says Sophie hit his truck," I threw over my shoulder and his face changed. By the time I stepped onto the porch, he was right behind me. Our neighbor stood in his driveway, one hand on his hip, jaw tight. He pointed at his rear bumper without a word, like a judge presenting evidence. A clean, fresh scrape sliced across the corner, metal slightly crumpled inward. It was small in the universe of accidents, and still my stomach rolled like I was falling. I turned toward our car parked near the curb because I knew I had to look. The front end had matching damage, pale streak across the corner, edge bent. I reached out and touched it, purely to prove I was not dreaming. The surface still felt warm, like the engine had not been quiet for long. My heart dropped in that familiar way you get right before you faint. "You see it," the neighbor called, voice harsh but steady. She clipped me, looked straight at me, then drove like nothing happened. I spun toward him, trying to pull my thoughts into some kind of order. "Was she alone?" I asked, because that detail suddenly mattered more than anything. He nodded once, frustration burning through every small movement. "She looked shaky, like she had no business behind a wheel," he added. I yelled her name and she still kept going anyway. The way he said her name made my skin prickle, like he was disappointed in all of us. "I am not trying to ruin her life, but this is not the first stunt." That last line landed like another blow, because it matched my private list exactly. Mark stepped off the porch and lifted both hands like a referee. "Okay, we are here, we are listening," he started, voice more careful now. I noticed he did not act surprised to see the damage, and that stuck. He glanced at our car, then at me, then quickly back to the neighbor. It felt like he was calculating something I was not allowed to see yet. "I am going to report this," the neighbor went on, shoulders still rigid. "I am not pressing charges right now, but I want it documented." I nodded before Mark could jump in, because I deserved that knot in my throat. "We understand," I said. "She should never have been driving at all." Saying it out loud tasted like metal, but it was the only honest sentence available. The front door opened behind us, and Sophie appeared in the doorway. Her hair was twisted into a quick knot, face bare, eyes too wide. She took in the three of us, then the bumper, then my hand still on the dent. Color drained from her cheeks so fast it looked like a trick. "What happened?" she asked, though we all knew that was useless. I stared at her, waiting for some version of truth to crawl out. She looked at the neighbor, then at me, then finally at the car. "I only tapped it," she muttered, voice thin as tissue. "I was going slow, I swear I was careful." Her eyes shimmered and she blinked hard, trying to hold back the wave. My brain snagged on the word careful because I had heard it somewhere. Behind her, Mark shifted his weight and folded his arms across his chest. He kept his eyes on the neighbor, not on our daughter, which told me plenty. "You left," the neighbor shot back, not interested in her explanation. "You saw me step out and you still drove off like I was invisible." She flinched and grabbed the railing, fingers whitening around the wood. "I panicked," she said, barely above a whisper now. "I thought if I stopped you would start screaming, and I just left." The hurt in his face deepened at that, more than his anger. "That is exactly the problem," he answered. "You treat this like a game." Sirens did not blare or anything dramatic like that, and honestly I am grateful. Instead, a patrol car turned onto our street at a normal pace, calm and steady. The neighbor exhaled sharply and lifted his hand in a sharp wave. "Good," he muttered, "we can straighten this out properly." My pulse spiked anyway, because uniforms and flashing lights always feel final. The officer stepped out and walked over, taking in the scene in silence. He glanced at the two vehicles, then at Sophie, then at us. "Afternoon," he started, short nod toward each person in turn. "Got a call about a minor collision and someone leaving before contact." The phrase minor collision sounded too polite for what I felt in my chest. Our neighbor launched into his account, hands moving as he described the moment. He pointed at his bumper, then at our car, then at Sophie again. She dropped her gaze to the pavement and kept it there like it might save her. I stood frozen, wanting to step between them and also wanting the truth recorded. Those two instincts pulled in different directions and ripped me up equally. When he finished, the officer turned to her with a measured look. "Is that roughly what happened?" he asked, tone calm yet firm enough. She swallowed and nodded, throat working like she had swallowed stones. "I backed out too quick, hit his truck and drove away," she said. The air felt heavier after the words left her mouth, like everyone heard a verdict. "Had you been drinking at any point today?" the officer asked next. The question hung there, heavier than the scrape on the metal. She shook her head fast, maybe a bit too fast for my comfort. "Not today," she answered. "Last night, but not today." That small confession still made my heart jump, even if it technically helped her. The officer studied her face, watching her eyes, noting every twitch. He asked her to walk a straight line along the edge of the driveway. She moved stiffly, arms slightly out, focusing hard on each step. Her balance was not perfect, yet not obviously impaired either. Relief and worry wrestled inside me, because almost fine still felt like gambling. He stepped back and wrote something on a small pad, hand moving steady. "Here is the situation," he finally said, gaze shifting between us. "The impact is minor, no one is hurt, no property beyond the vehicles." He looked at the neighbor. "You can pursue charges or we can record a statement." The neighbor stared at Sophie for a long beat before answering. "I want this on file," he decided, shoulders lifting and lowering once. "I am not dragging her through court today, but I want paper on it." The officer nodded, like he had expected that exact choice. "We can do that," he replied. "I will document the incident and your concerns." He spoke in a controlled tone that somehow still chilled me. Then he turned his attention to Mark in a way that made me pause. "You are the father?" he asked, eyes narrowing slightly at his face. Mark straightened, hands leaving his pockets like he had been caught. "Yeah," he answered, jaw muscle flicking for a second. Something passed between them, recognition or history, and my stomach sank. The officer tilted his head, looking more closely now. "Thought I recognized you," he said, voice lower yet still neutral. He glanced at our car again, then back to Mark, expression tightening. "You really want this pattern starting up in your driveway again," he added. That single word again sucked the air out of my lungs. My gaze snapped to Mark, waiting for him to deny or challenge it. Instead his mouth opened, then closed, then he focused on his shoes. It was such a small reaction, yet for me it was louder than shouting. Heat rushed to my face while I fought the urge to demand answers right there. This was not the moment, and also it absolutely was, which made me shake. The officer wrote a few more lines, then looked over at me. "You are the one who called in the earlier concern?" he asked quietly. It took me a second to realize he meant the near miss with the mailbox. My eyes widened because I had not dialed anyone that night. Someone else had, which meant our household drama had already spilled beyond our walls. "No," I answered, throat tight, still processing that new detail. He nodded slowly, as if that confirmed something he already suspected. "Well, I am going to recommend she does not operate a vehicle for a while," he said. "At least not until everyone in this home is on the same page." His emphasis on everyone landed squarely on Mark, not me. He took statements from each of us, short clipped questions and answers. Name time, what we remembered, what we thought we saw. When it was my turn, I hesitated for half a heartbeat. Did I minimize, or did I speak exactly what scared me? In the end, the honest part of me won again, even though I knew it might blow up later. "I took her keys last week because she drove home drunk," I told him. "I thought the vehicle was off limits, I did not know she still had access." His pen paused for half a second before moving again. "Did you authorize her to use the car today?" he asked, looking at me. I opened my mouth, then closed it, because technically I had not and someone else had. My eyes slid to Mark before I could stop them. The officer noticed, of course he did, he was not blind. Mark stiffened a little, then lifted his chin, ready to speak. "I let her take it to work earlier this week," he admitted. "I told her to keep it short, and I thought it would be fine." There it was, in front of a stranger, no way to spin it. He had undercut me, then trusted our 19-year-old to handle the line. The officer watched him for a long moment, expression unreadable but not kind. "You know how this goes," he said softly. "Second chances only work when adults enforce them." Hearing that from someone outside, the family hurt more than all my own doubts. When everything was written, he handed the neighbor a card. "If the damage looks worse later, you can follow up," he explained. He turned to Sophie. "This goes on record even without charges." She nodded, face blank, eyes dull like she had shut everything off. That flat look scared me more than tears, because it meant she was already filing this under unfair. As he stepped away, he paused one last time near Mark. "I remember your file," he said quietly, just loud enough for me to hear. "I hoped that night would be your last lesson with alcohol and cars." He did not elaborate, and I felt my pulse pound in my ears. Whatever he was referring to, I clearly did not know the full story. After the patrol car rolled off, the street felt unnaturally quiet. The neighbor muttered that we would talk about repair costs later. He walked back to his house without looking at us again. The distance between his driveway and ours suddenly felt like a canyon. I stood in that space, unsure which direction terrified me more. Sophie broke first, spinning toward me with wet eyes. "You sold me out," she accused, voice shaking from anger and humiliation. "You told him about last weekend, and now it is on record forever." She wiped at her cheeks like she could smudge the afternoon away. "You just love making sure everyone knows how messed up I am." Her words hit hard because part of me knew she believed that. In her head, this was not about safety, this was about control. "I told him the truth because I am scared," I answered. "I would rather deal with paperwork than an obituary." She flinched like I had slapped her, then turned to Mark for backup. "You just stood there and let her do that?" she demanded. He rubbed his temples, looking like the victim of a bad headache. "This has gotten out of hand," he muttered, more to himself than to us. He looked at me, then away, as if my face was dangerous to study. "We can talk inside," he added, and walked toward the door without waiting. Sophie followed close behind him, leaving me alone near the damaged cars. I walked up to our front bumper again and laid my hand on it. The metal was cooler now, yet still carried a faint trace of warmth. You know that feeling when you touch something that almost burned you earlier? That weird mix of relief and leftover fear, like the heat is hiding inside. Inside the house, voices already floated from the living room. "I should not have told him everything," Sophie was saying, words clipped. "He is going to keep an eye on me now forever." "Maybe that is not the worst thing," Mark answered, voice low but tense. I stepped into the doorway, and both sets of eyes landed on me. "We are all in this room," I said, throat rough. "If we are going to dissect me, at least do it to my face." Sophie folded her arms tight, shoulders up around her ears. "So what now?" she asked. "I lose my job, I stay locked inside, then what?" She stared me down like we were strangers fighting over a shared hallway. "You will not lose your income," I told her, steady as I could. "I will get you where you need to go, and we will figure out rides." She laughed, harsh and hollow, no humor at all in it. "I do not want a chauffeur, I want my life back." She pushed past me toward the hallway, leaving the words hanging like smoke. When she disappeared into her room, I turned to Mark. The anger I had tried to hold back finally cracked open. "What did he mean?" I asked, voice low but full of edge. "What is this about some pattern in your old file in last lesson?" My heart pounded so hard I could hear it, and still I waited. He dropped onto the couch, elbows on his knees, staring at the rug. "Not now," he muttered. "We already had enough drama for one day." "Not now," I repeated, disbelief sharp enough to hurt my own throat. "An officer just looked you in the eye and talked about some previous disaster. I find out in front of our kid that you have history you never mentioned." He lifted his head at that, face tight and tired. "I did not say never mentioned," he answered. "I said not now." That technicality made me want to throw something across the room. "Do you really think splitting hairs helps?" I asked, voice shaking. "Because from here it looks like secrets on top of more bad judgment." He scrubbed his hands over his face and let out a long breath. "I made mistakes before we even met," he said, tone flat. "They are not relevant to today, and I have moved past them." The way he emphasized moved past sounded like a locked door. It only made me more certain there was something behind it worth seeing. "We just watched our daughter repeat something you already survived," I answered. Relevant feels like an understatement right now, honestly. He closed his eyes for a few seconds, maybe counting his patience. When he opened them, they looked colder than I had seen in a while. "If you want to keep dredging up old crap, do it without me," he said, standing. He headed down the hall toward our bedroom, shoulders rigid, steps heavy. The urge to chase him and demand every detail burned in my chest. At the same time, the image of Sophie with that blank stare replayed. I stood stuck between two crises, one loud and current, one buried and unfinished. Somehow I knew both were tied to the same stupid ring of keys. That night I hovered outside her room, listening through the thin door. Music played softly on the other side, not her usual loud playlists. Every so often I heard a muffled sniff or the creak of her bed. My hand hovered near the doorknob, wanting to go in and make things right. I did not turn it because I honestly had no idea what right even meant anymore. Later, lying in the dark, I replayed the afternoon like a bad movie. The neighbor's voice, the officer's eyes on Mark, the word again. Tiny pieces that did not fit together yet, but still formed a shape. I kept thinking that if I had held the line harder, none of this happened. Then another thought crept in, uglier, that maybe I had never been holding anything at all. I yanked the storage bin out of the closet so hard the lid flew off. Files slid sideways and hit the floor in a messy fan. My hands were already shaking before I touched a single page. That one word from the officer kept pounding in my ears. Again, like this was a rerun for my husband, not a warning. You know that feeling when your brain finally connects two old weird dots? The shove of recognition hits and suddenly you cannot unsee it. His face when the patrol car pulled up that first night. The way he looked away when I mentioned calling the cops. It's all lined up in one ugly row, right on my bedroom carpet. I dropped to my knees and started flipping through random folders. Insurance papers, tax forms, old pay stubs with faded ink. None of it was what I wanted, and all of it stank of normal life. I kept going anyway because I already knew I would not sleep. Not until I knew exactly what that officer had been talking about. A corner of yellowed paper peeked out from under an N. Velop. The heading made my chest seize before I finished reading it. There it was, bold and mechanical across the top line. State versus Mark, followed by our last name and a case number. I stared so long the words blurred, then snapped back into focus. I started scanning down the page, eyes jumping over legal phrases. Driving under the influence, injury involved, property damage. My stomach rolled and my mouth went dry at the same time. This was not some college citation for open containers in a parking lot. This was the kind of thing parents whisper about for decades. There was a second sheet clipped behind the first one. Victim impact summary, short and bland and devastating. Passenger transported to hospital with head trauma and fractured ribs. Released after several days, continuing physical therapy at time of writing. I had to sit back because the floor suddenly tilted under me. My first ridiculous thought was practical. How did I not know about medical bills, about any of this? Then I saw a different piece of paper tucked behind the others. Settlement agreement, private, with a number that made my throat clench. I recognized his father's name beneath the signature line, not his. I traced the ink with one fingertip, not really touching it. So that was how he had moved past it, apparently. His parents cut a check, the court eased up, everyone moved on. Except that officer had not forgotten, and now I could not either. Suddenly we all did dumb things line sounded rot. The bedroom door creaked and I jerked my head up fast. Mark stood there in the frame, hair messy, eyes narrowed at the mess. He took in the files spread around me, his whole posture tightening. Looking for something, he asked, voice careful and flat. My fingers closed around the charges sheet before I even thought. I held the paper up halfway, not fully, like I needed courage. Yeah, I answered, apparently I found it. He glanced at the heading and his jaw clenched on reflex. That tiny movement told me this was not some mix-up. He knew exactly what I was holding and when it was from. You went through my stuff, he said, stepping into the room. His voice carried that injured tone he uses when cornered. This is not your junk drawer, I shot back, heat rising fast. A cop stood in our yard and talked about your record like current news. I shook the sheet once, I needed to know what he meant. He rubbed the bridge of his nose, eyes closing for a beat. That was years before we met, he finally muttered. I handled it, learned from it, and moved forward. The rehearsed quality in those words made me want to tear them apart. Yeah, I said, it really shows in our driveway right now. His eyes opened sharper now and locked on mine. Do not twist this into the same thing, his voice went low. I was older, I had been drinking, it was a whole different context. I laughed once, short and harsh, because the logic almost broke me. You do hear yourself right, that is not the defense you think it is. He crouched to my level, reaching for the page with one hand. I pulled it back before he could grab the corner. Leave it, I snapped. You had your clean slate for years already. My heart felt like it was pounding in my throat. That kid in your car did not get a clean slate, did they? He sat back on his heels, eyes darting away for a second. They recovered, he said quietly. It was a bad night, not a life sentence. I pushed to my feet in one sudden movement, file still clutched tight. You do not get to rewrite it as one rough night and nothing else. Injuries and settlements are not typical party stories, I added. He stood too slower, palms open like he was afraid I might swing. I am not proud of it, he said, voice tight now. I did my classes, my meetings, everything they ordered. He exhaled through his teeth. I lost my license for almost a year. His shoulders lifted slightly. I have not driven drunk since. I believed that part, which made this all even worse somehow. Because he knew exactly how fast things could unravel under alcohol. He knew how one casual ride could turn into loaded paperwork. Yet he still handed Sophie those spare keys and told her to be cautious. And he still told me I was dramatic for wanting her grounded. Why did you never tell me? I asked, throat burning. He shrugged, a small helpless gesture that made me angrier. It was over when we started dating, he answered quietly. I did not want to lead with the worst chapter of my life. For a long time it stopped mattering until you dug it up again. I stared at him because that line floored me. It stopped mattering for you, I shot back. It stayed very current for that officer, clearly, and probably that family. I shook the thick folder once, paper rattling between my fingers. And now our daughter has a hit and run report sitting on top of yours. He shifted his weight, frustration finally breaking through the calm. You are acting like I pushed her into the driver's seat, he snapped. I gave her a chance to show responsibility after she screwed up once. That is what my parents never did, and it made everything worse. His eyes flashed, they treated me like a criminal forever. There it was, the raw wound under all his sweet speeches. Part of me understood, which made this feel even messier. Your parents bailaid you out with lawyer money and then over-policed you, I said. And your response is to swing the other direction with our kid. Congratulations, you turned guilt into a parenting plan. His mouth opened, then shut, then opened again. I will not let my past be chained around her neck, he said. She deserves a chance to screw up without getting branded for life. I stared at him, feeling something cold settling in my chest. Screw-ups with vehicles and booze do not stay small, I answered. You know that. We stood there breathing hard in the same room, miles apart. The file felt heavy, like it was made of more than paper. I dropped it onto the bed and pages slid halfway loose. Court dates, signatures, the neat scrawl of some long-retired clerk. Physical proof that this was not just a haunting story in his head. I thought I understood why you kept defending her, I said slowly. Thought you just wanted to be the nice parent for once. Now I see you trying to redo your own arrest through her. My voice shook and I did not even bother hiding it anymore. This is not therapy, Mark, this is traffic and concrete. He took a step toward me, hands half lifted. Stop pretending you are the only one who cares if she lives, he insisted. I am terrified too, you do not own fear in this house. He jabbed a finger toward the window, toward the street outside. I just do not think turning her life into a prison fixes anything. I swallowed hard and looked away, out into the dark yard. Prisons are usually what come after convictions, I said. What I am trying to avoid is a hospital call in the middle of the night. My voice dropped lower, or a knock on someone else's door because of her. He flinched like I had hit an old scar, which maybe I had. He rubbed his forehead again and finally stepped back. I am done going in circles on this tonight, he muttered. We are not going to agree, and we are both worn out. He turned toward the door, leaving the mess on the bed. I have work in the morning, we will talk when we are calmer. He walked out, leaving me alone with the paperwork. I stared after him, heart beating too hard to let me sit. There was still something I could not let go of from that first night. The way the cop kept asking about details, I did not even remember. The specific times, the exact route she took home, the near miss. That was when I remembered the dash cam and my stomach dropped. We had installed it after a fender bender a year earlier. It backed up video to a memory card, plus an app for our phones. I had completely forgotten it existed the night she swerved into the yard. Apparently, I was the only one who forgot, which stung later. I grabbed my phone and opened the app with clumsy fingers. My thumb shook as I scrolled through the list of dates. Clips lined up neatly, timestamps marching in perfect order. Then I hit the night she came home drunk, and everything went strange. There was a jump where there should not have been one. Short recording at the start of the evening when the driveway was empty. Then nothing for several hours, a clean gap like the car had vanished. The next clip started with the car already parked, engine quiet. The system does not choose moments based on boredom. That meant someone had gone in and removed something. You know that chill that hits when technology lines up with your gut. My whole body went cold even though the room was warm. I backed out and tried again in case I had tapped wrong. Same gap, same missing block where her wild entrance should have lived. The app showed a little warning icon I had never seen before. I went out to the driveway in my socks, not even caring. The night air cut through my anger and made me shake harder. I opened the driver's side door and reached up to the dashcam mount. The memory card slot had a tiny plastic cover I had never noticed. It did not sit flush now, like someone had pried it recently. I snapped the cover open and removed the card with a click. The tiny thing sat on my palm, innocent and horrifying. I pictured him in this seat, fingers sliding it out after that first chaos. The same man who told me I was overreacting and to let our kid breathe. Apparently, he also believed in wiping evidence while he was at it. Back inside, I used an old adapter and plugged the card into my laptop. Folders filled the screen with little date stamps and file names. I clicked through the week around that party night, one clip after Ano. There were clear recordings of random errands, a grocery run, a school pickup. Then again, that single date where everything went blank halfway through the evening. The files from that night had all been renamed, slightly different. They ended earlier than they should have, shorter than usual, almost trimmed. I did not need to be an expert to see someone had messed with them. A single notion settled in my head and would not leave. He had not just helped her get away with a bad choice, he had edited reality. I could have confronted him right then, stormed into the bedroom. Instead, I sat there at the kitchen table, laptop glowing in the dark. If I barged in swinging, he would shut down and call me paranoid again. If I waited, there was the risk I would talk myself out of it. Waiting felt more dangerous but also more effective, which is a cruel balance. He walked into the kitchen the next morning half-dressed, rubbing his neck. He froze when he saw the dashcam card next to my coffee mug. His eyes flicked from the card to my face and back like a silent ping-pong. Morning, I said, nothing else, letting the silence swell. He reached for the mug cabinet instead of the card, which said everything. I checked the recordings, I started, keeping my tone almost neutral. Saw that interesting blank spot on the night she came home wasted. His hand paused midair, fingers hovering over the handle. I pulled it so the system would not overwrite important stuff, he tried. The lie was flimsy even before he finished the sentence. I tilted my head and watched him, not saying anything. That quiet made him fidget, which honestly gave me grim satisfaction. You erased it, I finally said. You did not just pull it. His shoulders sagged in one small, defeated movement. He turned around slowly, leaning against the counter like he needed support. Do you want her arrested? He asked, voice low and rough. Do you want that permanently tied to her name for one stupid night? The words were tired, not angry, and somehow that felt worse. I saw how drunk she was, he went on, if that footage ended up somewhere official. He shook his head, leaving the sentence hanging. I stared down at the little card on the table, then back at him. So you chose to help her hide the full story, I answered. You deleted the one thing that might have scared her straight. He let out a humorless huff. Trauma is not the only teacher, Aaron. Sometimes protecting your kid means stepping in before the system chews them. The twisted part is I understood that instinct on some level. No parent dreams of their child in court over a drive home. But I also remembered that paper with another kid's injuries listed. I am not asking for jail, I said. I am asking for reality. She thinks she pulled into the yard a little crooked, and that is it. He pushed off the counter and moved closer, palms open again. You want her to sit there replaying her worst moment for years? He asked, staring at grainy footage of herself swerving, beating herself up forever. That image actually did hurt, which made this even more complicated. I want her to actually understand how close she came, I replied. He shook his head, eyes tight. Look, I kept that girl out of a courtroom, he said. I will take that on myself if I have to. Let me be the one who screwed this part up, not her. His mouth twisted. I already did my time as the neighborhood idiot. So you erase hers instead, I shot back. You realize you are not just protecting her, you are protecting your comfort. I have to be the heavy while you quietly clean up behind us. The realization tasted bitter. You get to be the hero in your head both ways. He flinched because I had hit something he did not want named. For a second he looked almost small, which I had never seen. My parents made sure everyone knew my screw-up, he said. Every holiday, every argument, it was right there on the table. His eyes went distant for a moment. I still hear my mother that night. He shook it off. I promised myself my kid would not be the family cautionary tale. And now she is on a police incident report anyway, I reminded him. The neighbor told half the block already, trust me. Except now there is no clear record at home, only shouting and blaming. I gestured at the card. All that is left is your secret editing and my constant panic. He looked like he wanted to argue, yet nothing came out. We stood there in that cramped kitchen, the silence turning heavy again. I slid the memory card closer to him across the table. You want to carry this, I said. Fine, own it. Own the fact that you chose erasing over facing. Because I am done pretending this is just softness or mercy. He stared at the card, then at me, something shifting behind his eyes. You are not the only one who gets to make hard calls, he murmured. Then he picked up the card and loosed his fist around it. For a second I wanted to snatch it back, to somehow salvage proof. Then I realized the real proof was standing right in front of me. Later that week I caught Sophie and Mark whispering near the garage. Their voices dropped when I walked past, not quite subtle enough. I heard fragments float through the half-open door. She will calm down from him, and I cannot do anything right from her. That pairing of lines twisted inside my chest like a screwdriver. I paused near the corner and listened a few seconds longer. I just need some freedom, she said, voice thick with frustration. I already feel branded as the dangerous one in this house. He muttered something about trust and second chances and mistakes. I heard the phrase, your mom means well, and almost laughed out loud. I stepped into view and they both went still. You two planning a jailbreak? I asked, keeping my tone lightish. Her face shut down hard and fast, that new mask she had developed. We were talking about school, she answered, eyes daring me to question it. He slipped his hands into his pockets and looked at the floor. Maybe I should have blown up right there and then. Instead I felt this tired, sick quiet settle over me. You know what? I said, forcing my voice steady. I am done arguing in corners and over footage and old files. I looked at both of them. Next steps will not involve any more secret keys. I walked away before they could respond, heart pounding in my throat. I did not have a detailed plan yet, just one clear decision. If I could not trust my partner to hold the line with me. If my kid thought erasing evidence was a form of love. Then I was going to take the one object that kept tempting all of us off the board. I wish I could say that choice felt noble and strong in that moment. Truth is, it felt desperate and maybe a little spiteful. Like flipping the game table because everyone kept cheating. I can see all that now, writing this with some distance. Back then, all I knew was that something had to break before we did. The metal hook clanged under the front bumper before anyone else was awake. The driver crouched, slid the chain through, and tightened it with quick practiced motions. I stood on the porch in my robe, arms crossed so I would not grab him. He lifted his head once, squinting at me like he was checking my resolve. You are sure this is the one going? He asked, hand resting on the winch. Positive, my voice came out rough, not shaky, which surprised me. I held the envelope with the signed title folded inside, edges cutting my palm. If I hid the car in a storage unit, they would track it down. If I removed just the keys again, they would invent more workarounds. This was the only move left that did not involve calling actual cops on my own kid. The winch whined as the front wheels started to lift off the ground. I forced myself to watch every inch, like a punishment I deserved too. I knew once that truck turned the corner, there was no undoing this. I could not blame wine, adrenaline, or a bad night for this choice. This was me in daylight making a deliberate cut. The front door banged open behind me, hard enough to rattle the frame. "What the hell is going on?" Mark's voice hit my back like a shove. I did not turn right away, because if I saw his face I might fold. The driver paused, thumb hovering over the control, eyes sliding between us. "Keep going," I told him, then finally faced my husband. He wore last night's shirt, hair sticking up, eyes wide with sleep and panic. "You called a tow?" he asked, glancing from me to the lifted car. His gaze bounced off the truck logo, then fixed on the missing license plate. I had taken it off an hour earlier and set it by the door. Even that small detail made him look almost betrayed. "I sold it yesterday," I said, gripping the envelope tighter. "They are finishing the pickup, then they wire the rest of the payment." For a second he just stared, like his brain skipped a gear. Without talking to us, he finally managed, voice climbing. "You made that call alone for something all three of us use." "I made that call because I am the only one who stops," I answered. My throat burned, but my words came out steady, probably from pure stubbornness. When I say no more keys, I actually mean it. When I say I am scared someone is going to die, I believe myself. I jerked my chin toward the street. "That car has caused enough damage for this house." He stepped closer, bare feet slapping the porch, jaw clenched. "You want to talk damage?" he shot back, pointing at the truck. "You think selling her car behind her back will not wreck anything? You just told our kid you do not trust her ever to grow up. She will remember this longer than any stupid scrape on a bumper." "Good," I said, and I hated how fast that came out. "Maybe she will remember that nobody got physically broken while under my watch." The driver cleared his throat softly, wanting to finish and vanish. "Ma'am, I still need your last signature," he said, extending a small clipboard. My hand shook once as I signed, then steadied when I pushed the board back. The front wheels settled into the cradle, chains tightening with a final clack. The driver climbed into his cab, clearly praying we would not keep talking. I watched the truck ease away while Mark ran a hand over his face. He looked like someone watching a house fire, except the building was us. The taillights disappeared at the end of the road, and the driveway looked naked. Behind us, footsteps pounded through the entryway and onto the porch. "Where is my car?" Sophie demanded, voice sharp with disbelief. She took 3 steps past us toward the empty strip of pavement. Her eyes tracked up and down the curb like she had miscounted driveways. Then she spun back, gaze locking on me with something close to horror. "You did not," she breathed, shoulders lifting like she had been slapped. "You did not sell my car, tell me you did not do that." Her face went bright then drained, like every emotion tried to show up at once. "I need it for work, for school, for literally everything," she threw out. "You cannot just erase it because you are freaked out." I held up the envelope with the copy of the transfer paperwork. "It is gone," I said, no softness left to decorate it. "The money is going into an account labeled transportation and counseling. You will have rides, you will have options, you will not have your own ignition." I felt every word land like small stones, and I still said them. "You are out of your mind," she snapped, voice breaking on the last word. She stepped forward, hand flying out toward the envelope in my grip. I moved it behind my back, not to taunt her, just pure reflex. "You are obsessed with controlling me," she went on, eyes shining. "You care more about being right than about my actual life." Mark's jaw worked as he listened, arms crossing over his chest. "You could have talked this through," he told me, tone low and furious. "You knew we did not agree, so you waited for a quiet moment. You dragged it away while we slept like some thief in our own home." He laughed once, bitter. "You call me sneaky, then you do this." My face went hot because he was not completely wrong about the method. I had called the buyer from my car on my lunch break. I had picked an early pickup time hoping to avoid a showdown like this. Talking through it turned into you two ignoring every boundary I set, I replied. I am done asking permission to keep people breathing. Sophie threw her hands up, pacing in a tight line across the porch. Well, congratulations, everyone at work will think I got fired again, she said. I cannot keep begging rides off friends like some lost kid. Her voice cracked hard, and she pressed her lips together to stop it. So what now, Mom? Do I just sit in the house and rot? No, I answered, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. You will have a prepaid ride account for work and classes. The money from the car covers that and then some. You can request a ride every time you need to go somewhere that matters. My eyes met hers. You just will not be the one behind the wheel. She stared at me like I had spoken another language. So strangers get to drive me and you are fine with that, she asked. But your own kid is too dangerous to trust with her own car. Her expression twisted. You do hear how insulting that is, right? She rubbed her arm hard, like she wanted to scrub the whole morning off. Mark shook his head slowly, turning away from me toward her. You do not have to put up with this forever, he told her. You are almost out of the house, you can build your own life. He touched her shoulder and lowered his voice. We can figure something out if this keeps going. I caught the words we can, and they landed like a slap. Still teaming up, still positioning themselves as the reasonable ones. You are really going to undercut me again right now? I asked him. In front of the person who just left a scene without leaving a note. My chest felt tight, but my tone stayed level, which surprised me. He turned back, eyes hard. I am trying not to lose our daughter completely, he answered. You already decided you are willing to be the warden here. His lip curled slightly. Some of us still want a relationship after this. Sophie flinched, like that part was not meant to come out. For a second I almost apologized, which still shocks me now. Part of me wanted to say I overdid it, to rewind the toe. But the picture of that neighbor's scraped truck flashed behind my eyes. And the way her car had lunged across the yard days before. Those images rooted me harder than any argument. You both can hate me for a while, I said, voice quieter. I can live with that easier than I can live. With a funeral. And no, that is not dramatic, that is math, and I am tired. I gestured at the empty driveway again. This was the only lever left. I felt my hands tremble and forced them still at my sides. Sophie's shoulders dropped, her fury shifting into something heavier. I cannot stay here, she said, suddenly sounding much older. She looked at Mark. Can I crash at Ryan's place with you for a bit? He glanced at me once, gauging my reaction like a temperature check. Then he nodded, jaw set. Pack a bag, we will figure logistics later. Watching them walk inside together knocked the breath out of me. Their bodies moving in sync, hers pitched toward him like gravity. I heard drawers opening, hangers scraping, the quick frantic movements of leaving. I stayed on the porch because I knew if I followed I would beg. And I did not trust myself not to yank everything back out of the suitcase. They emerged 15 minutes later with one duffel and one backpack. She brushed past me without eye contact, chin high, cheeks wet. He paused for half a second, hand on the doorknob, eyes on mine. You did not have to blow up our whole life to prove a point, he said. Then he stepped out and closed the door behind them. I watched from the window as they climbed into his friend's car. The engine turned over and the vehicle rolled down the street. No one waved, not even a half gesture, not even out of habit. I stayed until the taillights vanished, then realized I was gripping the sill. When I let go, my fingers ached. The silence after they left felt artificial, like someone had muted the world. I moved through the house without really seeing it, just shapes and corners. The kitchen clock ticked way too loudly, each second landing like a small jab. I poured water and did not drink it, just watched it sit on the counter. Honestly, that whole afternoon I moved like I was underwater. I wish I could say I felt victorious like the tough parent. I did not. I felt sick, like I had ripped out a piece of myself. Part of me kept replaying the tow truck leaving over and over. Another part replayed that officer asking Mark about patterns over and over. Between those loops, there was almost no space left in my head. At some point, I opened my laptop and typed parent enabling alcohol use. Page after page loaded, full of words like boundaries and consequences. I scanned paragraphs about rescuing versus protecting, and none of it felt simple. On one side, there were stories of kids cut off too hard, going worse. On the other, there were stories of families pretending until someone did not come home. One article mentioned using money for rides instead of cars for high-risk teens. It talked about shifting independence away from operating heavy machinery. I stared at that line for a long time, feeling both validated and disgusting. Like I had used a textbook to justify ripping away my daughter's favorite thing. Even though I made the call before reading it, my brain still checked for backup. That night the house creaked differently. I lay in bed and kept hearing phantom doors open. Every time, I half expected Sophie to appear and ask to talk. Instead, the hours crawled forward and nobody walked down the hall. It is incredible how loud your own heartbeat sounds when there is nothing else. Around midnight, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. My pulse jumped so fast I almost dropped it picking it up. It was a text from Sophie, only 3 words. Do not call me. No punctuation, no emoji, just that blunt order. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. Every response I considered sounded like begging or scolding or both. In the end, I typed 4 words and deleted 3. I left only this: money is set aside. Then I added, for rides whenever you need, and hit send before I chickened out. No reply came, which I half expected. I opened the banking app and created a new separate sub-account. I named it RIDES in all caps, a label even my future self could not ignore. Then I transferred the full amount from the car sale into it. I set up a prepaid ride service linked to that account, then stared at the confirmation. I texted her again the next morning with the login details. This is for work and class trips, I wrote. Use it whenever you need to go somewhere safe and direct. My thumb hovered, then I added, no lecture attached, just logistics. That last part felt like swallowing pride. She read it an hour later, the little scene notification popping up. No answer again, but that tiny status still made my chest tighten. I pictured her lying on a couch at Ryan's place, phone in hand. Mark nearby, telling her I meant well but went too far. That mixed narrative probably sounded nicer than the one in my own head. A week crawled by like that, long and jagged. I went to work, came back, cooked too much food for one person. I kept the television on in the evenings just so the house would breathe. Sometimes I walked past the empty driveway and my stomach flipped. Empty meant safe, but it also meant abandoned, which is a strange relief. Then about 10 days after the sale, my phone buzzed again. This time it was one of Sophie's friends from the night of the first party. The text came in frantic bursts, no greetings, no small talk. Did you hear about Megan? The first line said. Before I could answer, another one came through with a photo. The picture was of a car that barely looked like one anymore. The front end was crumpled in on itself, windshield shattered into a spiderweb. The side panel peeled back, airbags hanging like empty lungs. I felt my knees wobble and grabbed the back of a chair to stay upright. Then I read the caption beneath the image. Drunk dude blew a red and plowed into her, the message read. She is in the hospital, conscious but wrecked, they had to cut her out. I read it twice before the words really landed. Then my hand started shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. My mind slammed right into the picture of Sophie behind our wheel. Is she stable? I typed back, fingers fumbling on the screen. Her friend answered right away. Yeah, but broken ribs, stitches everywhere, car totaled. Some idiot in a truck, twice the legal limit, night shift bartenders saw everything. I pressed my knuckles to my mouth to keep any sound from coming out. Because the first thought that hit me was not fair to anyone. The first thought was, that could have been my kid on either side. The second thought was, thank God it was not. And then came the third, nastier thought I am not proud of. They will both have to look at this and know what I meant. I hated myself for that small flicker of vindication, but it was there. A new text arrived before I finished that ugly thought. It was from Sophie this time, the first direct message in days. "Did you see Megan's car?" She wrote, no fluff. I answered yes and then paused, waiting again. 3 dots appeared, vanished, reappeared, like she kept starting and stopping. "It looks like it exploded," she finally sent. She said she thought he was fine to drive because he seemed funny and normal. I sat down slowly at the table because my legs suddenly felt unsure. "I am so mad at him," she wrote next. "I am mad at myself too." That last line cut deeper than any of the others. I took a deep breath and typed back carefully. "I am furious for her and terrified for all of you," I wrote. "I wish this was not how the lesson had to land." Then I added, "Do you have a ride to the hospital? Do you want to visit?" She replied faster than I expected. "I already used the app to get here," she said. I did not even think, I just opened it and went. That simple confession made my eyes sting. So the account had not been some symbolic gesture after all. She had actually trusted it enough in a crisis. There was a long pause, then another message. "I get why you sold it now," she wrote. "I still hate how you did it and I am still hurt. But if Megan had been me last week, you would never forgive yourself." My thumb hovered above the keyboard for a long time after that. I finally answered with the only honest thing I had. "I can live with you angry at me," I typed. "I could not live with losing you to something avoidable. I am sorry for the way I handled it. I was scared and clumsy." I hit send before I could edit away any of the softness. She took a while to answer that one. I pictured her sitting in a hospital hallway, phone in her lap. Maybe listening to machines, maybe watching nurses rush past. Maybe looking through a window at her friend wrapped in gauze. Eventually a new text blinked onto my screen. "I am still staying with Dad for now," she wrote. "I need space from you, but I am thinking about what you did different now. Can we talk after things calm down with Megan?" Reading that, I felt something in my chest loosen a little. Not relief exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. Later that week, Mark came by to drop off some paperwork. He did not step inside, just stayed on the porch with his hands in his pockets. "She told me you two texted," he said, eyes on the railing. "She also told me you keep checking on Megan's updates." His voice held less charge, more tired curiosity. "How is she?" I asked, meaning both the friend and our kid. "Megan is in pain but stable," he answered. "Long recovery though, serious stuff. And our daughter is shaken in a way I have never seen." He blew out a breath. "She keeps staring at that crash photo like it is homework." I nodded because I knew exactly what that kind of staring feels like. "I still think you moved too fast with the sale," he said. "I feel ambushed and I cannot pretend I do not." But when she described the wreck, I thought about our driveway. He looked up at me finally. "For 1 second I understood your level. Then age." He looked away again, like even that admission felt risky. "I did not want to be right like this," I told him. "I wanted some calm, boring proof that I overreacted and nobody died." He gave a short, humorless laugh at that. "We do not get those proofs very often, do we?" he said. "No one calls at midnight to report safe arrivals." We stood there, both staring at the empty slab where the car used to sit. "I will not buy her another one anytime soon," he said finally. "Even if she begs, even if I feel guilty as hell." He rubbed his jaw. "I am not promising forever, but I can promise that." It was the closest thing to shared ground we had touched in weeks. After he left, I sat on the couch with my phone. The house felt less accusing now, more like a tired witness. I opened the Notes app and stared at a blank screen. I wanted some kind of verdict, from anywhere but inside my own head. Family had their biases, friends had theirs, even therapists can lean. So I opened Reddit instead, and found the advice forum everyone uses for this. The one where people ask thousands of strangers to judge their worst moments. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long minute while I debated. Then I started typing the title that had been living in my skull for days. My daughter got way too hammered and drove intoxicated, so I took away her car, but my husband is. I laid out the story in blocks, trying to stick to facts. The party, the swerving, the stolen spare key, the quiet hit and run. The cop on our lawn, the missing dashcam clip, the old charge I discovered. The tow truck, the packed bag, the crash that nearly broke another family. Every few lines I paused and thought, am I telling this fairly? I did not make myself a saint in the post because I am not. I included the panic, the sneaky early morning sale, the harsh words. I admitted that part of me wanted them to see Megan's wreck as a lesson. I hated that part, but pretending it was not there felt worse. If I was asking for judgment, I wanted the full thing, not a cleaned resume. When I hit post, my hands were numb. There is a strange kind of quiet right after you hand your story to the internet. You cannot pull it back, and you cannot control the angles anymore. I set the phone face down on the table and leaned back. In that moment, I honestly did not know whether they would call me protective or unhinged. Here is the part I am still wrestling with even now. If some stranger had sold their kid's car like that, I might judge them too. If some stranger had let their kid keep driving after everything, I would judge that harder. Parenting seems to be choosing which form of guilt you can survive. I chose the one where my kid walks into a hospital on her own feet. Sophie and I are not magically healed, in case you are wondering. We still have clipped conversations and long pauses and careful steps. She still throws out little jabs about control when she is hurt. I still catch myself checking the street twice when I hear squealing brakes. We are not a lesson yet, just a family still figuring out the scar tissue. But I watch her open the Ride app now instead of reaching for keys. I watch her send Megan's stupid memes to make her laugh through the pain. I watch her hesitate before accepting late invitations that involve drinks. And every time I feel that same mix of fear and grim relief. The car is gone, the trust is dented, the story is still being written. So yeah, that is where I am when I write this. Empty driveway, separate accounts, one girl on a borrowed couch, one friend in rehab. One husband trying to redesign his own past while parenting in real time. One mom on the internet asking people who do not know her at all. Am I the monster for taking away the car, or the only adult in the room?